Well, howdy there, Internet students. Mr. Hermson here. Today we're going to start lesson 1.3, learning how to write equations, linear equations, basically. We may get into some other types of equations too, but the focus is linear equations. All right. Today we're going to do an inquiry lesson, just so you can kind of start to get comfortable with the process of writing equations for slope-intercept in slope-intercept form, which you don't even know what that is yet, probably, but you'll find out soon. Okay, so I'm going to have you complete the work after I show you how to do a problem, and then follow along, and then I'll give you just a short little assignment to see if you're understanding the basic parts of the slope-intercept equation. But let's just start by completing the table, making the graph, and then answering these questions. I'll do the first one for you, and then you can do the other three. Okay? So what you're going to do is take this x value right here, so -2, and you're going to put it in for x. So we need to do 2 times -2 plus 3 for this first one. And that equals -1. Here's the math on that. 2 times -2 plus 3. Okay, now I just have to do the same thing with the 0. I have to do 2 times 0 plus 3, which is 3. Then I have to do 2 times 2 plus 3, which is 7. Okay, so now I have 3 points that I can graph. -2, -1, which is right there. 0, 3, which is right there. And 2, 7, which is right there. Okay, and then I'm going to draw the line through those. So I want a pretty straight line, so I'm going to actually let this do it. So, oh no. Drawing the line again. Okay. Now I'm going to look at my line and answer question. It says for each graph, take note of the point where the line crosses the y-axis. Okay, remember this is the y-axis, right here, y-axis. Okay, now the point where it crosses, let me do this in red, is right there. What is that point? And the point is 0, 3. Okay. The points that you found in step 3 are called the y-intercepts. So this is called the y-intercept. Make observations about any patterns you notice. In order to answer this, you're going to have to do the rest of those. Okay, so this would be a good time to pause. Go ahead and do the rest of those. Okay, at this point you better check your work, make sure you're doing it correctly. So that's what the table should look like. That's what the line should look like. And those are the y-intercepts. So an observation you might make is that you should notice that all of the y-coordinates are 0, which makes sense because you're right in the middle of the graph. So the y-coordinates are 0. And another thing you might have noticed is that for some reason it's a 0 part of the table, right? And that this number is the same as this number if you look at the sign in front of it. So, so the y-coordinates are the 0. The y-coordinates are always 0. And you should also notice that in the equation, it's the added. We call that the constant term of the equation. constant term. So if you were to write an equation like this, y equals something times x plus something, the constant term is that extra added on or subtracted part. All right, let's move on. It says find the slope of each line. So I'll just go back and remind you how to do that. You can either use the graph or the table. Personally, well, I'll show you both ways. You decide which way you want to do it. I'll do line 2 here. If you use the table, you want to look at what's going on with these numbers. The y's, they're going down 6. That's like your rise. And these are going up 2. So the slope would be -6 over 2 or -3 over 1, which is -3 for line 2. The other way you can do that is just by putting in the steps, right? Make sure you look at the way the line's going. This is a this is a decreasing line, so it has a negative slope. This line is 6, this line is 2. So 6 over 2, which is -3. Okay, I'll fill that in and go ahead and you guys do the other 4, and then we'll look at those numbers and see if we don't notice something about that. Okay, if you did that right, here's the slopes that you should have got. And it says make some observations about any patterns you notice in the slope. Well, you can predict whether they're positive or negative by looking at the graph. That's something. Here's what I'd really like you to notice, that in each equation, so in each equation there's something times x plus something else or subtracted on the end of it. It's always the number in front of the x. Call that the coefficient of the equation, the number in front of x. It's always the coefficient. So just to show you that, so you really understand that, the equation for line 1 is 2x plus 3. Y equals 2x plus 3. Well, there it is. Right in front of the x is 2. The second equation is y equals -3x minus 2. Well, there it is, right there in front of the x. So the slope can be found from yeah, my dog kind of interrupted the video a little there. Anyway, so check this out, you guys. Without making a table, where do you think this graph will cross the y-axis? And what do you think its slope will be? See if you can answer that. Here's what I was hoping you were thinking. Because of what we just learned, this tells you where it's going to cross the y-axis. We call that the y-intercept. And this number in front of the x is the slope when you graph it. Okay, so so when you write a linear equation, in its simplest form, it looks like this. It'll be something times x plus something, and the m and the b are actually represent things. The m represents the slope. By the way, in the equation, the m is called the coefficient. And the b represents the y-intercept when you graph it. Okay, so the b, and we call that the constant term in the equation. So when it's in the equation, it's called coefficient in the constant term, but they also represent things when you graph them, or things when they're in tables. Okay, so now that we know that stuff, it makes it really quick to make a graph of something like this. And it works like this. So this 6 tells me where it's going to cross the y-axis. That's right there. This -3/4 tells me what the slope is, which means it's a decreasing line. It's going to go this way. And I'm going to go down 3. The top number, remember, that's your rise. And the bottom number is your run. So the top number basically is up or down. It's the vertical. and the bottom number is the horizontal. So I'm going to go down 3. That puts me here. Don't put a dot there. I just want to note that. And then I'm going to go over 4. Let me erase that dot so you're not confused by that. But if I connect these 2 points here, so I'm starting at 6, I go down 3 over 4. I'll put in a nice red line there. That should be a straight line. Let me do it like this. Make sure it's nice and straight. So if I go down 3 over 4, I get another dot, and if I could do that again if I wanted to. Down 3 over 4, that would put me there. And those dots will represent this equation. So actually, if I complete this line and go this way at the same angle, like this, and then that line represents that equation. All right? So let's just answer a couple questions before we move on here. How will a negative value for b, now remember again, here's what our equation looks like. Y equals something times x plus something, and so the b part is this. If the negative if b is a negative value, how will it translate on the coordinate plane differently than a positive value of b? If you want, you can go ahead and pause here and answer these 2 questions and then check back. All right, so a negative value of b means that you're going to be below the x-axis down here, where you cross. Okay, so if you have a negative value for b right here, that means whatever the equation is, it's going to cross below the x-axis. Okay, a negative value for m will tell you the direction the line goes. A negative value of n, since that's the slope, will tell you you have a decreasing line. Okay, a positive value means you're going to have an increasing line. All right, go ahead and do the next 4 problems. Identify the slope and the y-intercept for each, and you can check back to see if you got that right. So remember that the y-intercept is a point. That's why I always put the coordinate, made it a coordinate pair. So if you have a negative in front of, remember that the number in front of the x is the slope, so that would be -2. If you have a -1, remember that subtracting is the same as adding a negative. So that would make this a negative. Here it's plus -3x. The number in front of the x is the slope. And if there is no number in front of the x, remember that multiplying by 1 is the same as just the number. So you're going to think of it as 1 times x. 1 times x is equal to x. All right? When using slope-intercept form to graph a line, it helps to have the slope in fraction form. So like if you have a slope is 3, remember that that's the ratio 3 over 1, so that you have a rise and a run. Sometimes a linear equation does not have its slope and its y-intercept value clearly visible. So like this, y equals 3x, you can think of that as y equals 3x plus 0. That's actually a direct variation, and we know that it's going to cross the y-axis at 0, so the y-intercept is 0. If you have an equation like this where there is no number in front of x, that means that it's 0 for the slope. Okay? Now, if you want to convert something, so this isn't quite in this form, y equals mx plus b. What I would do is, to figure it out, is just think of 2 points that work. The y-intercept is the 0 term, so that means x is 0 and then y is some number. So you could figure that out by just putting in 0 for x. So instead of y plus 2 equals x, think about y plus 2 equals 0, and you can see that y would have to be negative 2. So the y-intercept is negative 2. And you can also get one other point just by, so here's your equation, y plus 2 equals x. So just think of another point that might work, like what if x was, and I'm just making up this number, what if x is 3? Then y would have to be 1, because 1 plus 2 equals 3. So the point is 3, 1. Well, now that you have 2 points, you can find the slope. So the slope is, the rise goes from negative 2 to 1, which is 3, and the run goes from 0 to 3, which is 3, so the slope is 3 over 3, or 1. So try that. Find 2 points that work for this equation, and then use those to find the slope and the y-intercept. Remember that the y-intercept is the 0 point, so for sure you want to put in 0 for y to figure, or for x to figure that one out. All right, give it a shot, see if you get it right. So I found this other point just by putting in 0 for y there. See if that works. And that works good. And given those 2 points now, I use those to find the slope of negative 4/3, and this is your y-intercept here. So the equation is this in slope-intercept form. Okay. So knowing what a y-intercept is, it's where it crosses the y-axis. What do you think the x-intercept is? Yeah, where it crosses the x-axis. And that point will look like this. Like in the last problem, that would be 3, 0, but you'll have 0 where the y value is. If you're given both an x-intercept and a y-intercept, what other information would you need to graph a line? Those are 2 points. So like in this last one, my x-intercept is 3, 0. My y-intercept is 0, 4. That's all you need is 2 points to draw a line. So you wouldn't need anything else. All right, this video is done. We'll start this tomorrow, but I'll give you on your homework, you can just do a few problems practicing identifying the slope and the y-intercept in an equation. Anyway, good luck with that. We'll talk to you soon.